The hush in the Joint Expeditionary Base Dining Facility was a fragile thing, a temporary truce between the clatter of steel trays and the low rumble of 1,000 conversations. It was the sound of fuel being taken on a perfunctory ritual before the resumption of duties. At a small table in the corner, away from the boisterous, territorial claims of unit-specific seating areas, Commander Evelyn Thorne ate her meal with methodical grace. Her uniform was a set of sterile charcoal coveralls devoid of rank insignia or name tape. The only identifier was a small circular patch on her left shoulder, a black phoenix rising from flames, its wings interwoven with stylized radio waves clutching a single lightning bolt in its talons. Beneath it in muted silver thread were the words Fides Antennibus, faith in the antenna. It was a patch few recognized, and those who did knew not to speak of it. To most, she was a ghost, a civilian contractor, a low-ranking logistics officer. Small, quiet, and by all appearances, insignificant. This appearance of insignificance was a magnet for a certain kind of attention. It drew the eyes of Staff Sergeant Dominic Briggs and his fire team from the 3rd Force Reconnaissance Company. They moved through the facility with the proprietary swagger of men who believed their physical prowess was the only currency that mattered. They were loud, their laughter sharp and percussive, a claim of dominance over the shared space. They saw the lone woman in her sterile uniform, her focus entirely on the meal before her, and read it as vulnerability, an invitation. Well, look what we got here, boys. Briggs's voice boomed intentionally loud enough to turn heads. He was a caricature of a warrior, his muscles straining the fabric of his camouflage utilities, a jawline that seemed engineered for belligerence. Lost little Navy bird way far from the water. His team 3 corporals with identical smirks fanned out around him. Corporal Jason Walters, lanky and perpetually grinning. Corporal Marcus Donnelly, built like a linebacker, all shoulders and intimidation. Lance Corporal Tyler Grant, younger than the others, eager to prove himself. They didn't sit but stood looming over her small table, casting long shadows under the sodium lamps. Thorne did not look up. She continued to eat, her movements economical and precise. A forkful of rice, a piece of baked fish. She chewed slowly, her gaze fixed on the midpoint of her tray. "Hey, I'm talking to you." Briggs pressed his tone, shifting from performative mockery to genuine irritation. He leaned forward, bracing his hands on her table. The metal legs scraped against the linoleum. "What's your deal? You some kind of pencil pusher from Fleet Logistics? Don't you know this is a warrior's table?" Walters pulled out his phone, holding it low. The small red light of the recording indicator was a malevolent spark in the dim light. He snickered, anticipating a confrontation that would later be replayed for the entertainment of their platoon. Thorne finished chewing. She placed her fork and knife perfectly parallel on her plate. Only then did she lift her head. Her eyes, a pale and disconcerting gray, met Briggs. There was no fear in them, no anger. There was nothing at all, a placid surface that reflected nothing back at him. It was this emptiness that seemed to infuriate him more than any defiance could. "You got a problem," Briggs growled, leaning closer. The smell of stale coffee and arrogance rolled off him. "You don't salute a staff non-commissioned officer? Or are you too important for that, Lieutenant?" He misidentified her presumed rank, a common error for those who saw a woman in an ambiguous uniform and defaulted to a junior officer grade. Thorne's gaze did not waver. It moved from his eyes to Walter's phone to the exact position of the 2 security cameras mounted on the far walls. She noted the angle, the probable field of view. She cataloged the faces of the other service members at nearby tables who were now pointedly looking away, not wanting to be involved. Her mind, a machine built for processing complex data streams, was doing what it always did, observing, documenting, analyzing. Heart rate 58 beats per minute, respirations 12 per minute, core temperature stable, emotional state controlled, threat assessment, minimal physical danger, maximum institutional risk. Security cameras, SSE-07 and SE-08, 45 degrees angles, clear sight lines. Recording device, Corporal's phone, red indicator, light likely standard resolution. Briggs' exact words logged for report. Timestamp 1832 hours. "You think you can just ignore me?" Briggs's voice dropped to a hiss. He moved, blocking her only path of egress from the table. His corporals shuffled, tightening the circle. They were a physical barrier, a cage of muscle and contempt. You're in our house now, and you need to learn some respect. We know how to teach it. We are going to ruin your life." The threat hung in the air, thick and ugly. Walters, the corporal with the phone, zoomed in on her face, waiting for the crack, the terror, the satisfying crumble of her composure. It never came. Commander Thorne blinked once, a slow, deliberate motion. She drew in a quiet breath. Then, with a fluid economy that was both unnerving and mesmerizing, she stood. She was not tall, but her posture was perfect, a straight line of disciplined calm. She picked up her tray. Briggs tensed, expecting her to throw it, to scream, to do something predictable. She did none of those things. She took one step to her left, a subtle pivot on the ball of her foot that brought her shoulder just inches from Donnelly's chest. He instinctively shifted his weight back, creating a gap. She flowed through it without touching him, a whisper of movement. She walked to the tray, returned, deposited her tray and utensils in their respective slots, and proceeded toward the exit. She never looked back. Behind her, the Marines stood in a confused cluster. Their planned confrontation had fizzled, leaving them with nothing but the stale adrenaline of an aborted fight. Briggs's face was a mask of thunderous fury. He had expected a reaction of victory. Instead, he had gotten nothing. He had been dismissed. "Yeah, you better walk away," he yelled at her, retreating back, his voice a hollow echo of its earlier confidence. Walter stopped recording, a disappointed frown on his face. "Well, that was boring, Staff Sergeant." "No, it's not over," Briggs muttered, his eyes narrowed. "She'll file a report. I guarantee it. We'll just have to file one first." He was already scripting the narrative in his head. A belligerent, unstable officer. A threat to good order and discipline. His word, the word of a force recon Marine against hers. He had no doubt whose story they would believe. 72 hours earlier, the sensitive, compartmented information facility was a concrete bunker buried beneath 3 layers of security fencing on the far side of the airfield. To enter, one passed through biometric scanners, cipher locks, and armed guards who checked credentials with the cold efficiency of men who understood that secrets were more valuable than lives. Inside, the air was refrigerated to a constant 62 degrees. The hum of servers and cooling fans created a white noise that pressed against the eardrums like deep water. The only light came from a constellation of glowing screens that filled the cavernous circular room, casting everything in shades of blue and green. This was the nerve center of Project Fides Antennibus. Faith in the antenna. Commander Evelyn Thorne sat at the center console, her fingers dancing across a holographic keyboard that projected from the curved surface of her desk. Around her, 6 specialists monitored individual stations, each responsible for a different slice of the global electromagnetic spectrum. Satellite downlinks, ground-based radar, communications intercepts, data traffic analysis, the faint electronic whispers of submarines deep in the Pacific, the chatter of aircraft over the Middle East, the pulse of a world at war, even in peacetime. To anyone else, it was an incomprehensible storm of noise. To her, it was a symphony. Her eyes tracked a data stream flowing across the central holographic display. A burst transmission encrypted, originating from the South China Sea. The pattern was unusual. Frequency hopping, spread spectrum, but with characteristics that reminded her of something old. Soviet-era architecture, she thought, but modernized, adapted. She isolated the signal, ran it through pattern-matching algorithms, cross-referenced it against known threat signatures. Nothing definitive. But the anomaly was there, a discordant note in the symphony. She made a notation in the log. Time-stamped. Geotagged. Filed for further analysis. Behind her, the hatch to the skiff cycled open with a pneumatic hiss. She didn't turn. She knew the footsteps. Senior Chief Petty Officer Garrett Mackenzie moved through the room with the deliberate gait of a man whose knees had logged too many miles on too many decks. At 62, he was the oldest man in the facility, his face a roadmap of hard years and harder decisions. His dress uniform bore the anchors and stars of a career that spanned 2 decades, from the tail end of the Cold War to the dawn of the digital age. He stopped beside her console, arms crossed, and studied the screens with the practiced eye of a man who had once done her job with vacuum tubes and paper charts. "You've been here 30 hours straight," he said. His voice was gravel mixed with seawater, the product of too many years shouting over the noise of shipboard machinery. 28, Thorne corrected, not looking away from the display. "That's not better. The spectrum doesn't sleep, Senior Chief. Neither did your father. Mackenzie's tone shifted, taking on an edge. He used to stare at those scopes until his eyes bled. That mindset got him killed in Daran. Now she looked at him. Her pale gray eyes, so unsettling to others, met his without flinching. He died doing his duty, she said. He died because he forgot he was human. First cryptologist, second. Mackenzie pulled up a stool and sat, which was his way of indicating this was not a casual conversation. You keep running yourself into the ground, you're going to burn out. And when you burn out, people die. Not you, the people depending on you. Thorne turned back to her screens. I'm aware of my limits, Senior Chief. Are you? He reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila folder, the edges worn soft with age. He placed it on her console. Your father's file, declassified last year. I pulled it for you. She stared at the folder as if it were a live grenade. I served with him, Mackenzie continued, 1990 to 91. NSA Detachment Bahrain. He was the best signals analyst I ever worked with. Could pull a submarine's acoustic signature out of pure static. Could hear patterns nobody else heard. I know, Thorne said quietly. Do you know what his last status report said, 6 hours before the Scud hit? Mackenzie opened the folder, revealing a single sheet of yellowed paper. Typed, official, clinical. It said request denied for additional support personnel. Current manning adequate for mission requirements. No concerns. He was running on fumes just like you are now. Too proud to ask for help. Too stubborn to admit he needed sleep. Thorne's jaw tightened, the only external sign of emotion. The Scud that hit the barracks in Dahran killed 28 soldiers, Mackenzie said. Your father was number 14 on the casualty list, but he didn't die because of the Scud. He died because he was too exhausted to hear the warning. The Patriot system detected the inbound missile. They broadcast the alert on the emergency channel. Every other analyst in the region picked it up and got to shelter. Your father didn't. He was so deep in his work, so locked into the intercept he was running, that he never heard it. He closed the folder. You have his gift, Mackenzie said. Pattern recognition, frequency analysis, the ability to see signal in the noise. But you also have his curse. You think the mission is everything. You think you can do it alone, and that will get you killed just like it got him killed. Thorne said nothing for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible over the hum of the servers. I was 6 months old when he died. I never knew him. I know. My mother never remarried. She raised me by herself, worked 2 jobs. She told me stories about him, about how brilliant he was, how dedicated, how much he loved his country. Thorne's fingers curled into fists on the console. She told me he died a hero, that he was doing something important, something that mattered. He was, Mackenzie said, and he did, but he also made a mistake. He didn't trust his team. He didn't train them to be as good as he was because he thought only he could handle the mission. When he needed backup, nobody was ready. Don't make his mistake. Thorne turned to look at him, and for the first time there was something in her eyes, not tears, but a crack in the armor. Is that why you're here, Senior Chief, to make sure I don't turn into him? I'm here because I owe him, Mackenzie said. And because you're the best operator I've ever trained, but you're running yourself into the ground and that serves nobody. Not the mission, not your team, not you. He stood the stool, scraping against the floor. Exercise Trident Aegis kicks off in 3 days. Biggest joint force operation since Reforger 88. Pentagon's watching. If this goes sideways, heads will roll. I need you sharp, not exhausted, so go get some sleep. That's an order. Thorne held his gaze for a moment longer, then nodded. Aye, Senior Chief. But as he walked toward the hatch, she had already turned back to her screens. The anomaly in the South China Sea was still there, pulsing like a faint heartbeat. She couldn't let it go. Not yet. Mackenzie paused at the hatch, looked back, and shook his head. Then he left, and the heavy doors sealed behind him with the finality of a tomb. 0530 hours. The combatant diver training facility was dark and silent. The massive flood pool, a sheet of black glass reflecting the faint glow of emergency lights. The air smelled of chlorine and rubber, sharp and astringent. Thorne stood at the edge of the pool in a black dive skin, her body a lean silhouette against the darkness. Beside her, the closed-circuit rebreather sat on the deck, a Draeger LR-5, the same model used by Navy SEALs for covert insertions. No bubbles, no noise, just the silent rhythm of breathing and the cold embrace of water. She configured the rebreather with practiced efficiency, checking the scrubber canister, the oxygen flow, the pressure gauges. Every movement was precise, methodical. This was ritual. This was control. She slipped the harness over her shoulders, adjusted the straps, and secured the mouthpiece. Then, without hesitation, she stepped off the edge and dropped into the water. The cold hit her like a fist, driving the air from her lungs. She descended into absolute darkness, the faint glow of the surface disappearing within seconds. Down here, there was no light, no sound except the rhythmic puff of the rebreather, no sense of up or down, only the pressure on her skin and the weight of the water above her. This was the second part of her ritual. In the skiff, she governed the world of signals of intangible data streams and electromagnetic ghosts. Here she governed her own physical self. She controlled her heart rate, her breathing, her body's response to the immense pressure. She navigated the submerged obstacle course from memory, her movements fluid and efficient. It was a form of meditation, a reinforcement of absolute control in an environment of absolute chaos. The insults of lesser men could not penetrate this deep, silent peace. Here there was only the mission, the body, and the cold, crushing, clarifying truth of the water. She completed 3 circuits of the obstacle course, each one faster than the last. Then she ascended slowly, decompressing, letting her body adjust to the changing pressure. When she broke the surface, the air felt warm despite the chill of the facility. She climbed out, removed the rebreather, and stood dripping on the deck. Her heart rate was 52 beats per minute, respirations 10 per minute. Perfect control. In the shadows near the equipment lockers, Mackenzie watched her. He said nothing. He had seen this ritual before in other operators, in other warriors who carried the weight of the world on their shoulders. It was the price of excellence, the cost of being the one everyone depended on. He waited until she had changed and gathered her gear, then fell into step beside her as she walked toward the exit. "Your father used to do that too," he said. "Dive at dark 30, said it cleared his head." "It does," Thorne said. "He also used to have nightmares about the signals he couldn't break, the patterns he couldn't solve, the intercepts that slipped through his fingers." Mackenzie glanced at her. "Do you—" She didn't answer immediately. They walked in silence through the pre-dawn darkness, their footsteps echoing across the empty parade ground. Finally, she said, "Yes." "What do you dream about?" "Static," she said, "in explosions, in a voice I never got to hear in real life calling for help that never came." Mackenzie nodded. "That's the curse. We carry the dead with us. Their mistakes, their regrets, their unfinished business." He stopped, turned to face her. "But you don't have to carry them alone. That's what a team is for. Remember that." Thorne met his eyes. "I will, Senior Chief." But even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. She had always been alone. It was the only way she knew how to be. 1,200 hours. The operations briefing room was a cathedral of modern warfare, its walls lined with screens displaying real-time intelligence feeds from every corner of the globe. At the center, a massive holographic table projected a 3-dimensional map of the exercise area, 200 square miles of desert littoral zones and simulated urban terrain. The room was packed with officers from every branch of service: Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, Army, Coast Guard, a joint force assembled for the most ambitious training exercise the Department of Defense had conducted in a decade. At the head of the table stood Major General William Bradford, a barrel-chested man whose dress uniform displayed 2 stars and a rack of ribbons that told the story of a 30-year career spanning Desert Storm, Afghanistan, and Iraq. His face was carved from granite, his eyes the color of winter storms. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice filling the room without need for amplification. "In 3 days, we kick off Exercise Trident Aegis. This is not a training evolution. This is a validation of our ability to fight and win against a near-peer adversary in a contested operational environment. Everything we do here will be observed by the Joint Chiefs, by the Secretary of Defense, and by our allies across the Pacific. Failure is not an option." He gestured to the holographic map, and it zoomed in on a section of the exercise area. Blue Force consists of 3,000 personnel across all services, 50 aircraft, 20 ships, 200 ground vehicles. Our objective is to seize and hold key terrain while maintaining operational security and command and control integrity against a sophisticated opposition force. The map shifted, highlighting enemy positions in red. Red Force is led by Air Force Colonel Tobias Webb, arguably the finest electronic warfare officer in the Department of Defense. His team has spent 6 months studying our doctrine, our communications architecture, and our vulnerabilities. Their objective is simple: break our C4ISR network and render Blue Force blind, deaf, and ineffective. A murmur ran through the room. Webb's reputation was legendary. He was the man who had single-handedly shut down an entire carrier strike group during a NATO exercise in 2019. He was the man who had penetrated NSA's classified network during a red team assessment and left a digital calling card on the director's personal terminal. To counter this threat, Bradford continued, we have integrated assets from Naval Special Warfare Development Group, specifically their signals, intelligence detachment, Project Fides Antennibus. Every eye in the room turned toward the back corner, where Commander Thorne sat in her sterile coveralls, nearly invisible among the sea of dress uniforms. Mackenzie sat beside her, his presence a silent statement of authority. Commander Thorne's unit will maintain the integrity of our electromagnetic spectrum, Bradford said. They will ensure that our GPS, our communications, and our data links remain operational regardless of Red Force actions. They are the reason we will succeed. Thorne did not react to the attention. She sat perfectly still, her pale gray eyes fixed on the holographic map, already analyzing the terrain, the likely avenues of approach, the potential vulnerabilities in the network architecture. Bradford swept his gaze across the room. This exercise will test every aspect of our warfighting capability: kinetic strikes, cyber operations, information warfare. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to one thing. Can we maintain command and control when the enemy is doing everything in their power to take it away from us? That is the question we will answer. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. 3 days, people. Use them wisely. Dismissed. The room erupted into motion as officers filed out, breaking into smaller groups to coordinate their respective components of the operation. Thorne remained seated, studying the holographic map with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Mackenzie leaned close. You see something? The terrain, she said. It's ideal for mobile emitters. Webb will use the ravines and depressions to mask his signature. He'll set up decoys to draw our fire while the primary emitters operate from concealed positions. Classic Soviet doctrine, Mackenzie said. Primary, secondary, tertiary, and a command node tying it all together. Exactly. Thorne's fingers moved through the holographic display, tracing potential positions. He'll use frequency hopping to avoid detection. Probably adaptive learning, our countermeasures in real time. Can you beat it? She turned to look at him, and for the first time there was something like uncertainty in her eyes. I don't know. If he's using what I think he's using, it's going to be close. What do you think he's using? Something that shouldn't exist outside of classified labs, she said quietly. Something that was stolen 2 years ago and never recovered. Mackenzie's expression darkened. You think Webb is compromised? I think this exercise is more than just a training evolution, Thorne said. I think it's a test, and I think we're about to find out just how much damage a stolen algorithm can do in the wrong hands. Before Mackenzie could respond, a voice cut through the thinning crowd. Commander Thorne. She turned to see Lieutenant Colonel Harrison Voss approaching, his Navy dress uniform, crisp and immaculate. Voss was her commanding officer, a pragmatic man who had earned his rank through competence rather than politics. He had been a tank commander in Desert Storm back when warfare was still measured in tons of steel and high-explosive rounds. The transition to digital warfare had not been easy for him, but he had adapted. He understood that the future belonged to people like Thorne. Sir, she said, standing. Walk with me, Voss said. They moved away from the briefing room, Mackenzie trailing a respectful distance behind. Voss led them to a secure conference room, sealed the door, and activated the white noise generators that would defeat any listening devices. I just got a call from the Provost Marshal, Voss said without preamble. You filed an incident report last night, harassment by Marine Corps personnel. Yes, sir, Thorne said. Staff Sergeant Dominic Briggs and 3 members of his fire team. 1832 hours main dining facility. Verbal threats and intimidation. I documented everything. I've seen the security footage, Voss said. It corroborates your statement. But I've also been informed that Briggs has filed a counter-complaint. He's claiming you refused to acknowledge him when he addressed you respectfully and that your behavior was erratic and menacing. Thorne's expression did not change. That is false, sir. He has a video, Voss said. Edited, obviously, but his battalion commander is taking it seriously. Colonel Pierce wants you removed from the exercise pending an investigation. That would be inadvisable, sir, Thorne said. Project FIDE's Antennibus is integral to the C4ISR architecture. Without my unit, the exercise will fail. I'm aware, Voss said, which is why I told Pierce to shove his request up his ass in slightly more diplomatic terms. But this is going to be a problem, Commander. Briggs has posted that video on social media. It's already making the rounds in the Marine Corps community. The narrative is set. Crazy Navy officer thinks she's too good for the rest of us. The truth will come out, sir, Thorne said. I have faith in the system. Voss studied her for a long moment. You're remarkably calm about this. Most officers would be furious or scared. Fury and fear are distractions, sir, Thorne said. The mission takes precedence. If the system functions correctly, justice will be served. If it doesn't, my emotional state is irrelevant. That's a very cold way of looking at it, Voss said. It's the only way that makes sense, sir. Voss shook his head, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Your father would be proud. Mackenzie's told me stories. You're just like him, for better or worse. Thank you, sir, Thorne said, though she wasn't sure it was a compliment. Focus on the exercise, Voss said. I'll handle the political fallout. But understand this, you're under a microscope now. Marine Corps Command is watching. They're looking for any reason to paint you as the problem. Don't give them one. I won't, sir. Good. Dismissed. Thorne saluted, executed a perfect about-face, and left the conference room with Mackenzie in tow. As the door sealed behind them, Voss sat down heavily in his chair and rubbed his temples. This was going to be a mess. He could feel it. 2,300 hours. Thorne's quarters were Spartan. A narrow bunk, a small desk, a wall locker containing 3 identical sets of coveralls. No personal effects except a single photograph in a plain frame on the desk, a young man in a Navy uniform standing on the deck of a ship, squinting into the sun. Her father, a stranger whose face she had memorized from photographs because she had never known him in life. She sat on the edge of the bunk, the lights dimmed to near darkness, and stared at the photograph. Her hands, usually so steady, trembled slightly. The adrenaline from the confrontation in the dining facility had finally caught up with her hours later, in the privacy of her quarters. She closed her eyes and took a slow breath, engaging the techniques she had learned over years of training. Box breathing. 4 seconds in. Hold for 4. 4 seconds out. Hold for 4. Repeat. Her heart rate slowed. The trembling stopped. Control reasserted itself. But beneath the control, there was something else. Something she rarely allowed herself to acknowledge. Loneliness. A crushing, suffocating sense of isolation that came from being the person everyone depended on, but no one truly knew. Her phone buzzed. A message. She glanced at the screen. Mackenzie, you okay? She typed a reply. Affirmative. Another buzz. Liar. But I respect the attempt. Get some sleep. Big day tomorrow. She set the phone aside and lay back on the bunk staring at the ceiling. Sleep would not come easily tonight. It never did. The nightmares were waiting just below the surface. Static, explosions, a voice calling for help. But she had learned to live with the nightmares. They were part of the kind, part of the burden, part of the price of being the person who stood between chaos and order, between noise and signal, between the enemy and everything worth protecting. She closed her eyes and let the darkness take her. Tomorrow the war would begin, and she would be ready. 0600 hours, exercise Trident, Aegis Day 1. The operations center was a controlled storm of activity. 60 watch officers sat at tiered consoles arranged in concentric circles around the massive holographic display that dominated the room. The display showed the entire exercise area in 3 dimensions, terrain rendered in shades of brown and gray, friendly forces, glowing blue enemy positions, marked in ominous red. Major General Bradford stood at the command station, hands clasped behind his back, his posture radiating the calm authority of a man who had commanded troops in actual combat. Around him, the watchstander spoke in the clipped, efficient tones of military professionalism. Blue 1-1, this is Overwatch. You are cleared hot on target package Alpha. Execute. Sky 7, maintain current orbit. Continue ISR sweep of Sector 4. All stations, this is Overwatch. Exercise is now live. I say again, exercise is live. Time on target for initial contact, 12 minutes. The holographic display updated in real time as Blue Force units moved into position. Infantry companies advancing across the desert, armor platoons maneuvering along the highway corridors, aircraft orbiting overhead, their sensor feeds streaming into the network, ships offshore, their radar painting the littoral zones. It was a ballet of violence choreographed down to the second, dependent entirely on the invisible architecture of communications and data that tied everything together. Deep beneath the operations center in the concrete tomb of the skiff, Commander Thorne watched her own version of the battle unfold. Her screen showed what the operations center could not see: the electromagnetic spectrum itself. A living, breathing entity of radio waves and data streams and satellite signals. Every GPS transmission, every encrypted voice channel, every data link carrying targeting information, intelligence updates, and command directives. She could see it all. The entire nervous system of modern warfare laid bare. Senior Chief Mackenzie stood at her shoulder, watching the same screens with the practiced eye of a man who had fought the invisible war long before computers made it look easy. Network status, he asked. Optimal, Thorne replied, her fingers dancing across the holographic keyboard. Link 16 data links are showing 100% functionality. GPS constellation is nominal, all 31 satellites visible and locked. SATCOM channels are green across all bands. Encrypted voice is clear. No interference, no jamming, no anomalies. Too quiet, Mackenzie said. Agreed. Thorne pulled up a secondary display showing the electronic warfare threat board. It was empty. No hostile emissions, no jamming, no attempt by Red Force to contest the electromagnetic spectrum. Webb is waiting. He wants us comfortable, confident. He wants us to think we've already won. Classic Soviet doctrine, Mackenzie said. Lull them into complacency, then hit them with everything at once. Learned that the hard way in '89 watching East German signals intelligence operate near the Berlin Wall. Thorne's attention shifted to a different screen. The anomaly she had detected days earlier was still there, that faint signal from the South China Sea. But now there was something new. A similar pattern much closer, somewhere within the exercise area itself. She isolated the signal, ran it through her analysis algorithms. The pattern was unmistakable. Soviet-era frequency hopping, spread spectrum, but modernized. The dwell time was too fast for manual systems. The hop sequence was too complex for traditional algorithms. This was something else, something adaptive. Senior Chief, she said quietly, look at this. Mackenzie leaned closer, studying the waveform analysis. His expression darkened. That's an R330 Zytel pattern, he said. Soviet EW system from the 1980s. We used to track them during the Cold War, but this one's different. It's faster, smarter. Someone updated the algorithm, Thorne said. Took the old architecture and married it to modern processing power. It's learning our countermeasures before we even deploy them. Can you track it? Not yet. It's too subtle. Just probing our defenses, testing our response times. She made a notation in her log. But it's out there. And when Webb is ready, he's going to use it to take us apart. The hours crawled forward. On the surface, the exercise proceeded flawlessly. Blue Force units advanced according to plan. Objectives were seized. Enemy positions were neutralized. The operations center was a chorus of successful engagements and positive situation reports. But Thorne could see the storm building. The anomalous signal was growing stronger, more frequent. Webb was positioning his pieces, setting the trap. At hour 12, she got her first confirmation. A GPS satellite showed a micro drift in its position data, 0.3 degrees. Well, within normal parameters. The kind of variation that happened naturally due to atmospheric conditions and relativistic effects. The operations center systems automatically compensated for it. Nobody noticed, but Thorne noticed. Senior Chief, she said, GPS drift on bird 7, 0.3 degrees, bearing 090. Mackenzie pulled up the satellite telemetry. Could be natural variation. Could be, Thorne agreed. But look at the pattern. It's not random. It's following a predictable curve. Someone is spoofing the signal. She pulled up the communications status board. Packet loss on the encrypted data channels had increased from 0.1% to 2%. Again, well within acceptable parameters. Again, automatically compensated by the network's error correction protocols. But it was there. A hairline fracture in the foundation. It's starting, she said. Mackenzie keyed his microphone. Operations Center, this is Skiff. Be advised, we are detecting anomalous signals consistent with electronic attack. Recommend heightened alert status. The response came back immediately. Skiff, this is Overwatch. Negative anomalies detected on our end. All systems nominal. Continue monitoring. Mackenzie looked at Thorne. They can't see it yet. It's too subtle. Webb is brilliant, Thorne said, her voice carrying a note of professional admiration. He's not attacking the network. He's eroding it, like acid eating through metal. By the time they realize what's happening, it will be too late. She pulled up a predictive model feeding in the current rate of degradation. The computer projected the network's breaking point, hour 14, 90 minutes away. We need to warn them, Mackenzie said. They won't listen, Thorne replied. Not until the system actually fails. By then, we'll be in full crisis mode. She leaned back in her chair, her mind racing through options. We need to be ready. When the network collapses, we'll have maybe 10 minutes before the entire exercise becomes a complete disaster. We need to identify Webb's emitters, map his network architecture, and find a way to take him down before Blue Force is rendered completely ineffective. That's a tall order, Mackenzie said. It's the mission, Thorne replied. Somewhere in the desert, 35 kilometers from friendly lines, Staff Sergeant Briggs and his reconnaissance team lay in a rocky depression, their desert camouflage making them nearly invisible against the terrain. They had been inserted by helicopters 6 hours earlier, tasked with conducting surveillance on a simulated enemy supply route. The mission was textbook force recon work. Observe, report, do not engage. They relied entirely on their communications gear, their GPS, and their satellite imagery to maintain situational awareness and coordinate with higher command. Briggs checked his handheld GPS unit. Their position was marked precisely on the digital map, a blue icon labeled Recon 3. The objective area was 2 kilometers north. Enemy activity was minimal. The mission was going perfectly. He keyed his radio. Watch, this is Recon 3. Sit rep position, secure no enemy contact, continuing observation of objective area. Comms are solid. Over. The response crackled back immediately. Recon 3, this is Overwatch. Good copy. Maintain position. Continue observation. Out. Corporal Walters, lying prone next to Briggs, lowered his binoculars. This is almost too easy, Staff Sergeant. We've been out here 6 hours and haven't seen anything. That's because we're good at our job, Briggs said. And because whoever's running the network knows their stuff. Comms are clearer than I've ever heard on an exercise. Corporal Donnelly, manning the team's long-range radio, looked up from his equipment. Have to admit, whoever that tech nerd in the skiff is, they know how to keep a network running. Briggs said nothing. The image of the small woman in the dining facility flashed through his mind. The one they had confronted. The one who had stared at him with those empty gray eyes and then walked away as if he didn't exist. He pushed the thought aside. He had filed his complaint. His team had backed him up. The video was clear. She was the problem, not him. Once the exercise was over, she would be on and everything would go back to normal. He checked his GPS again. Same position, everything nominal. He had no idea that in 90 minutes, everything he depended on would disappear. Hour 14 arrived like an executioner's blade. Thorne saw it first. The GPS drift suddenly accelerated. 0.3 degrees became 2 degrees, then 10 degrees. Then the positions became completely randomized, showing satellites that didn't exist in orbital parameters that defied physics. The encrypted communications channels dissolved into static. Not all at once, but in a cascading failure that rippled through the network like a virus. Voice channels first, then data links, then the satellite connections themselves. The holographic display in the operations center began to fragment. Friendly units disappeared from the map, then reappeared in impossible locations. Some showed in the ocean, others in the mountains. The carefully orchestrated ballet of warfare became a chaotic mess of confused overlapping icons. Alarm klaxons screamed. Red strobe lights bathed the operations center in hellish illumination. "What the hell is happening?" General Bradford's voice cut through the chaos like a whip. "Get me a picture, get me communications," a watch officer shouted over the din. "Sir, GPS is showing massive drift. All satellites are reporting false positions." Another voice. "Encrypted comms are down across all channels. We're getting nothing but static. Data links are failing. Link 16 is offline. Drone feeds are gone. We're blind." Bradford slammed his fist on the console. "I need answers, people. What is attacking us?" In the skiff, Thorne's screens showed the full scope of the catastrophe. The network was not just failing. It was being systematically dismantled. Every countermeasure the automated systems deployed was immediately neutralized. Every backup frequency was jammed. Every fail-safe protocol was rendered useless. "Senior Chief," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos with eerie calm, "Webb is using a polymorphic algorithm. It's not just jamming us, it's learning from us. Every time our systems try to adapt, it analyzes the adaptation and predicts our next move. It's operating faster than our automated responses can handle." "Can you beat it?" Mackenzie asked. "Not by fighting it," Thorne said. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up diagnostic routines and network architecture maps. "Traditional electronic warfare is useless. We need to think differently." She isolated one data stream studying its behavior. The algorithm was sophisticated, but it was built on predictable foundations. Game theory, decision trees, probabilistic modeling. It assumed rational actors making rational choices based on established doctrine. An idea crystallized in her mind. Dangerous, unconventional, but possibly their only chance. "The algorithm assumes we'll follow communications doctrine," she said. "It predicts our frequency hopping patterns based on standard procedures. But what if we don't follow doctrine? What if we make irrational choices?" Mackenzie caught on immediately. "Feed it garbage. Violate every protocol in the book. Force it to analyze behavior it can't predict." Exactly. Thorne's fingers moved with surgical precision, creating a series of ghost signals that violated every principle of military communications. Frequencies that overlapped. Dwell times that were too short. Power levels that were too high. Modulation schemes that made no tactical sense. She broadcast the ghost signals into the electromagnetic spectrum. The algorithm seized on them, analyzing them, trying to predict the pattern. But there was no pattern, just chaos. And in that chaos, Thorne found her opening. The algorithm's processing power was finite. By forcing it to analyze meaningless data, she was consuming its computational resources, slowing it down, creating gaps in its coverage. Through those gaps, she could see the truth. The architecture of Webb's network. "I've got them," she said. 3 primary emitters. Mobile systems, vehicle-mounted. They're using terrain masking to hide their positions, but I can triangulate based on signal strength and propagation delay. Her screens filled with data, waveform analysis, frequency correlation, time difference of arrival calculations. The old-school mathematics of direction finding combined with the processing power of modern computers. 3 positions materialized on her tactical display. Primary emitter Papa Zulu 7989, secondary emitter Sierra X-ray 5421, and Tango Victor 6630. She tagged each position, calculating GPS coordinates with manual triangulation methods that predated satellite navigation by decades. Mackenzie watched over her shoulder, recognition dawning in his eyes. "You're using Cold War tradecraft, manual direction finding, just like we did in Berlin." "Technology changes," Thorne said, echoing his own words from days earlier. "Principles don't." But she wasn't finished. There was a fourth signal source, fainter than the others, more sophisticated. This was Webb's command node, the brain of the operation, the system coordinating all 3 emitters into a unified electronic warfare assault. She isolated it, traced it, mapped its position. "Command node located," she said. "Modified ANTSQ 238 Tactical Operations Center. Grid coordinates Romeo Tango 9147. Mackenzie keyed his microphone. "Operations Center, this is SGIF. We have identified the attack architecture and located hostile emitters. Request immediate fire support on designated targets. The response was chaos. Multiple voices talking over each other. Confusion. Desperation. Thorne made a decision. She overrode the standard communication protocols and broadcast directly on the command frequency. Her voice cut through the static like a blade through fog. All stations, this is Phoenix, stand by. In the operations center, every head turned toward the speakers. The watch officers fell silent, staring at the communications panel as if it had just spoken in tongues. Phoenix, Bradford growled. Who the hell is Phoenix? That call sign is not on my roster. Thorne continued, her voice utterly calm, devoid of stress or emotion. Be advised, Red Force is employing nested polymorphic electronic attack utilizing quantum encryption exploitation. Attack architecture consists of 3 primary emitters and 1 command node. I have neutralized the adaptive algorithm and am restoring network functionality now. Her fingers moved across the keyboard. She wasn't breaking Webb's algorithm. She was hijacking it. Using the ghost signals as a carrier wave, she injected her own code into the quantum key distribution channel that the algorithm used for its predictive modeling. The algorithm, trusting the mathematical signatures it was designed to follow, accepted her input as legitimate traffic. In seconds, she had control. The GPS spoofing stopped. Satellite positions snapped back to their true locations. On the holographic display in the operations center, the chaos resolved into order. Friendly units appeared in their actual positions, no longer scattered across impossible terrain. GPS constellation restored, Thorne's voice announced. All satellites nominal. Position updates are accurate. The encrypted communications channels cleared. Static vanished and replaced by clean, crisp voice traffic. Encrypted communications restored. Switch to Alpha 3, backup frequency set. Data links are re-establishing. Link 16 is coming back online. The drone feeds flickered, then stabilized. High-definition imagery streamed into the operations center, showing real-time views of the battlefield. ISR feeds restored. All sensors are nominal. The entire resurrection took 143 seconds. In the stunned silence of the operations center, Bradford stared at the communications panel as if seeing it for the first time. Phoenix, he said slowly. Who are you? Before Thorne could respond, she continued her mission. The network was restored, but the threat remained. Webb's emitters were still out there, still capable of launching another attack. Fire support officer, this is Phoenix. I am transmitting targeting data for 3 hostile emitters and 1 command node. Grid coordinates follow Papa Zulu 7989, Sierra X-Ray 5421, Tango Victor 6630, and Romeo Tango 9147. Request immediate kinetic strike. The fire support officer, a Marine captain, looked at Bradford. The general nodded. Coordinates received, the captain said. Firing solutions are locked. Sir. Execute, Bradford ordered. Time on target, 90 seconds. Thorne wasn't finished. She pulled up the drone feed from Sky 7, an MQ-9 Reaper orbiting at 15,000 feet. Its onboard navigation was still corrupted, showing it miles from its actual position. Sky 7, this is Phoenix. Your onboard navigation is compromised. Disregard GPS. I am feeding you direct telemetry via burst transmission on a high-band frequency that hostile forces are not monitoring. Your primary target is the Red Force mobile command node. I am painting the target for you now. She activated the laser designator from a ground-based forward observer position that still had line of sight to Webb's command vehicle. The reflected laser energy created a beacon that the drone's sensors could follow. The drone operator, sitting in a trailer 2 miles from the operations center, watched in amazement as his screen suddenly cleared. A targeting reticle appeared locked onto a camouflage vehicle hidden in a ravine that hadn't shown up on any previous reconnaissance. Phoenix, this is Sky 7. Target acquired. Requesting clearance for weapons release. Sky 7, you are cleared hot. Execute. The Hellfire missile left the rail with a flash of fire and a contrail of smoke. It tracked the laser designation, perfectly adjusting its flight path in real time. 8 seconds later, it impacted the command vehicle in a simulated explosion that the exercise umpires marked as a catastrophic kill. The fire support officer's voice came over the command net. Splash 1, Splash 2, Splash 3. All targets destroyed. On Thorne's tactical display, Webb's network architecture collapsed. The three primary emitters went offline, their signals disappearing from the electromagnetic spectrum. The command node was gone. The sophisticated adaptive algorithm that had brought the entire Blue Force network to its knees was suddenly orphaned, directionless, impotent. The exercise network stabilized completely. Every system showed green. GPS was accurate. Communications were clear. Data links were functioning at full capacity. Total time from Thorne's first transmission to the final missile impact, 2 minutes and 43 seconds. The operations center was silent. 60 watch officers sat at their consoles staring at screens that now showed a completely functional, healthy network. They looked like people who had just witnessed a miracle. General Bradford keyed his microphone, his voice carrying a note of profound respect and more than a little confusion. "Phoenix, this is Trident Actual. Who the hell are you?" In the back of the operations center, Lieutenant Colonel Voss stepped forward. He had been standing quietly against the wall, watching the entire crisis unfold. Now he moved to the command station and spoke directly to Bradford. "Sir, that's my officer. Commander Evelyn Thorne, United States Navy Naval Special Warfare Development Group, Signals Intelligence Detachment, Project Fides Antennibus." Bradford turned to stare at him. "That's your SIGINT commander." "Yes, sir." "The one Colonel Pierce wants removed from the exercise because she allegedly threatened a Marine NCO." "The same, sir." Senior Chief Mackenzie, who had also entered the operations center during the crisis, stepped forward. "Sir, if I may, Commander Thorne is the best signals intelligence officers I've worked with in 40 years of service. What you just witnessed is why she commands that unit. She doesn't just operate in the electromagnetic spectrum, she owns it." Bradford looked at the holographic display, then at the communications panel, then back at Voss. "Commander Thorne," he said into his microphone, "on behalf of the entire Blue Force, thank you. That was the most impressive display of technical warfare I have ever witnessed. When this exercise is over, you and I need to have a conversation about the future of electronic warfare in the Department of Defense." In the skiff, Thorne allowed herself the smallest of smiles. "Thank you, sir. Just doing my job." She terminated the connection and leaned back in her chair. Her heart rate, which had remained perfectly controlled throughout the entire crisis, finally began to slow toward its resting rate. Mackenzie placed a hand on her shoulder. "Your father would be proud." "I hope so, Senior Chief." 35 kilometers away in a rocky depression in the desert, Staff Sergeant Briggs sat in stunned silence. His radio, which had been nothing but static for 15 minutes, suddenly crackled to life with clear, perfect communications traffic. His GPS unit, which had shown his team in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, snapped back to their correct position. Corporal Walters lowered his radio handset, his face pale. "Staff Sergeant, did you hear that?" The voice on the command net. "That was, I know," Briggs said, his voice hollow. "That was the officer from the dining facility," Donnelly said. "The one we threatened, the one we said we'd ruin." "I know," Briggs repeated. Lance Corporal Grant, the youngest of the team, looked at Briggs with dawning horror. "Staff Sergeant, what did we do?" "That woman just saved the entire exercise. She saved us. We were dead out here without comms and GPS, and we threatened to destroy her career." Briggs said nothing. He stared at his GPS unit, watching the blue icon that marked his position, and realized that icon only existed because of her. Every radio transmission they had made for the past 6 hours had only been possible because of her. Their entire mission, their entire capability as a reconnaissance unit, depended on the invisible architecture she maintained. And they had mocked her, called her a pencil pusher, a tech nerd, someone who wasn't a real warrior. The weight of his mistake crashed down on him like an avalanche. His career was over. He knew it with absolute certainty. He had threatened a Tier 1 operator, a commander, someone so far above his level that he couldn't even comprehend the scope of what she did. He had thought she was insignificant. He had been catastrophically wrong. Walters looked at the others. "We need to do something. We need to fix this." "There's nothing to fix," Briggs said quietly. "We're done, all of us. We just don't know it yet." In the operations center, General Bradford was already making calls. To the Pentagon, to the Director of National Intelligence, to the Joint Chiefs. The conversation was the same in each case. "We just tested our network against the most sophisticated electronic attack our best people could devise. We were defeated in minutes. And then one officer working alone identified the attack architecture, neutralized it, and provided targeting data that eliminated the threat. Total time less than 3 minutes. Yes, I'm serious. Yes, you need to see this. I'm sending you the full recording now. The implications were staggering. If one officer could do this, what could a fully staffed and properly funded unit do? What could a dozen units do? What could a global network of these capabilities do? Project Fides in Tenebris had just validated its existence in the most dramatic way possible, and Commander Thorne had just become one of the most valuable assets in the Department of Defense. But for Thorne herself sitting in the cold silence of the skiff, none of that mattered. She had done her job. The network was restored. The mission was successful. Everything else was noise. She pulled up her logs and began documenting the incident. Every signal, every frequency, every decision point. The after-action report would be extensive, detailed, and utterly clinical. Because that was who she was. That was what she did. She stood between chaos and order, between noise and signal, between the enemy and everything worth protecting. And she did it alone in the cold darkness of a concrete bunker where no one could see her and no one could know the true scope of what she carried. Mackenzie watched her work, and his heart ached for the young woman who had inherited her father's gift and his curse. She was brilliant. She was essential. She was the best he had ever trained. And she was utterly, completely alone. "Commander," he said gently, "take a break. You've earned it." "The network requires monitoring, Senior Chief," she replied, not looking away from her screens. "Webb might have additional capabilities. I need to ensure the network will survive for 15 minutes without you," Mackenzie interrupted. "Go get some air. Drink some water. Be human for a moment." She hesitated, then nodded. 15 minutes, Senior Chief." 15 minutes. She stood, her movements stiff from hours at the console, and walked toward the hatch. As she passed through the security layers and emerged into the afternoon sun, she allowed herself one moment of satisfaction. She had won. Not just the technical battle, but the larger war. She had proven her worth in the most undeniable way possible. Now, whatever happened with Briggs and his complaint, the truth was clear. She was not insignificant. She was not a pencil pusher. She was not just some tech nerd playing with computers. She was Phoenix. And she had just shown the entire Department of Defense what that meant. The Judge Advocate General's office was a study in institutional efficiency. Gray walls, government-issue furniture, filing cabinets that had witnessed decades of military justice. Lieutenant Commander Patricia Lowell sat behind her desk, her service dress uniform immaculate, her expression carved from professional neutrality. She had been a JAG officer for 12 years. She had prosecuted deserters, defended sailors, accused of everything from theft to assault, and navigated the treacherous waters of military law with the precision of a surgeon. She cared about one thing above all else: facts. And the facts in this case were damning. Before her lay two reports, the first filed by Commander Thorne at 1849 hours on the evening of the incident. 189 words. Precise. Clinical. No embellishment. Just dates, times, locations, witnesses, and exact quotes. It mentioned security cameras SSE-07 and SE-08. It noted that one of the Marines had recorded the incident on a personal phone. The second report filed by Staff Sergeant Briggs at 1932 hours, 43 minutes after Thorne's report. It was longer, more emotional, filled with accusations of erratic behavior, refusal to acknowledge proper military courtesy, and menacing conduct that created a hostile work environment. Lowell pulled up the security footage first. Two angles, both clear, both unobstructed. The timestamp showed 1832 hours, exactly as Thorne had reported. She watched the entire sequence. Briggs and his team approaching Thorne's table. Their body language aggressive, territorial. Briggs leaning over her, hands on the table. The circle of Marines tightening around her. Walters with his phone raised, clearly recording. The audio was faint, but audible enough to pick up Briggs' voice. "You're in our house now, and you need to learn some respect. We know how to teach it. We are going to ruin your life." Thorne's response was silence. Absolute, complete silence. She finished her meal, stood, and walked away without a word. No threats, no gestures, no menacing behavior of any kind. The security footage was unambiguous. Briggs had lied. Lowell pulled up the video that Walters had posted to social media, 8 seconds long. It started with Briggs asking what appeared to be a polite question, though the audio was conveniently muted for that portion. Then it cut directly to Thorne's face staring at him with those pale gray eyes unblinking for what appeared to be an uncomfortably long time. The video ended just as she stood up, making the movement seem abrupt and aggressive. A masterful edit. Deceptive. Designed to create a narrative that did not exist. Lowell had subpoenaed the phones of all four Marines. The warrant had been executed that morning, and the digital forensics team had recovered everything. The unedited video, the deleted text messages, the social media posts. The text messages told the complete story. 1 week before the incident, Briggs had conducted research on Thorne. He had discovered she commanded a classified signals intelligence unit. He had discussed with his team the need to put her in her place because tech nerds don't deserve respect like real warriors. This was not random harassment. This was premeditated. Lowell compiled her findings into a formal report. She attached the security footage, the unedited video, the text messages, and the social media posts. She documented 417 individual comments on the post, many of them explicitly misogynistic, some of them threatening. False official statements, conspiracy, conduct unbecoming. The evidence was overwhelming. She picked up her phone and called Colonel Raymond Pierce, the commanding officer of the 3rd Force Reconnaissance Battalion. Colonel, this is Lieutenant Commander Lowell Jag. I've completed my investigation into the incident involving Staff Sergeant Briggs and Commander Thorne. I need to brief you immediately. Sir, I'm going to be direct. Your Marines filed false reports and manufactured evidence. This is criminal conduct. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. How bad is it? Pierce asked, his voice tight. Bad enough that if this were a civilian court, they'd be looking at felony charges. In our system, it's a clear violation of Article 107, false official statements, and Article 134, conduct prejudicial to good order and discipline. The video evidence is unambiguous. They lied, Colonel, and they did it deliberately. Another pause. Then in a voice that carried the weight of profound disappointment, Pierce said, "Send me everything, I'll review it, and then we're going to have a conversation about honor and what it means to be a Marine." The next morning, Commander Thorne was summoned to Lieutenant Colonel Voss's office. She entered to find not just Voss, but also Senior Chief Mackenzie and Lieutenant Commander Lowell. Commander Voss said, gesturing to a chair, "Sit, we have news." Thorne sat, her posture perfect, her expression neutral. Lowell opened a tablet and turned it toward her. "Commander, I've completed my investigation. The evidence completely vindicates you. The security footage shows that Staff Sergeant Briggs and his team initiated the confrontation. The unedited video from Corporal Walter's phone captures the entire incident, including Briggs's threat to ruin your career. And the text messages demonstrate that this was premeditated harassment, not a spontaneous conflict." Thorne looked at the screen, but said nothing. "Colonel Pierce has been briefed," Lowell continued. "He's recommended non-judicial punishment under Article 15 for all four Marines. Maximum allowable penalties: reduction in rank, forfeiture of pay letters, of reprimand, and removal from force reconnaissance. They'll be reassigned to regular infantry units at different duty stations." Additionally, Voss added, "General Bradford has personally called Colonel Pierce to express his support for you. The events of yesterday's exercise have made it abundantly clear to everyone in the chain of command that you are an invaluable asset to this joint base and to the Department of Defense as a whole." Mackenzie leaned forward. "What the JAG is trying to say, Commander, is that you won. Completely. Briggs and his team are finished. Their careers are over, and you've been vindicated at the highest levels." Thorne absorbed this information with the same emotional neutrality she brought to everything else. "Thank you for the update. Will there be anything else?" Lowell frowned slightly. "Commander, don't you want to provide a victim impact statement? This is your opportunity to tell them how their actions affected you, how it felt to be harassed, threatened, and then slandered on social media." "No," Thorne said simply. "No. The facts speak for themselves, ma'am. My feelings are irrelevant to the administration of justice. The system has functioned correctly. The appropriate corrections are being made. I'm satisfied." Lowell exchanged a glance with Voss. She had prosecuted hundreds of cases, and she had never encountered a victim this detached from their own vindication. "Commander," she said carefully, "it's okay to be angry. It's okay to want them to understand what they did to you." "I'm not angry," Thorne said. Anger is a distraction from the mission. They violated regulations in good order. They're being punished. That's sufficient. After she left, Lopel turned to Voss. Is she always like that? Always, Voss replied. Her father was the same way. Senior chief can tell you stories. Mackenzie nodded slowly. She's the best operator I've ever trained, but she's also the loneliest person I've ever known. She doesn't let anyone in. Not really. She thinks emotion is weakness, so she's built walls so high nobody can climb them. He paused. Her father did the same thing. It's what got him killed. He didn't ask for help when he needed it because he thought he could handle everything alone. Will she make the same mistake? Lowell asked. I don't know, Mackenzie said, but I'm going to do everything I can to make sure she doesn't. 3 days later, the entire 3rd Force Reconnaissance Battalion was called to formation on the main parade deck. It was 0 to 800 hours, and the morning sun cast long shadows across the precisely aligned ranks of Marines in their service uniforms. 900 men stood at attention, their faces betraying nothing, their discipline absolute. But beneath the surface, there was a current of tension. Word had spread through the battalion about what was coming, about what Briggs had done, about who Commander Thorne really was. At the front of the formation on a raised reviewing platform stood Colonel Pierce. Beside him, the sergeant major. To his left, a small delegation from the Navy Lieutenant Colonel Voss, Senior Chief Mackenzie, and Commander Thorne herself. Thorne wore her service dress whites. The uniform was a stark contrast to the sterile coveralls she usually wore. Her rank insignia gleamed on her sleeves, 3 gold stripes with a star above the mark of an O5 commander. On her left shoulder, the Phoenix patch was clearly visible. On her chest, a modest ribbon rack, the Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal, the Global War on Terrorism Service Medal, and several others that spoke of a career spent in the shadows. She stood at parade rest, her face impassive, her eyes fixed on the middle distance. If she felt any satisfaction at this moment, she gave no sign of it. General Bradford stood at the back of the platform present as an observer. He wanted to see this, needed to see it. Colonel Pierce stepped forward to the microphone. His voice, amplified across the parade deck, carried the weight of command and bitter disappointment. Marines, he began. I have been in this Corps for 33 years. I have led Marines in 2 wars. I have seen courage and cowardice, honor and dishonor, strength and weakness. And in all that time, I have never been more disappointed in members of this battalion than I am today. The formation remained motionless, but the tension ratcheted higher. We pride ourselves on being force reconnaissance. We are the elite. We are expected to be smarter, faster, and more disciplined than anyone else on the battlefield. We are expected to embody the warrior ethos in everything we do. But 4 Marines in this battalion forgot what that means. They forgot about honor. They forgot about integrity. They forgot about respect. Pierce paused, letting his words settle like stones. Some of you may have seen a video on social media, a video that showed a Navy officer allegedly behaving in an erratic and menacing manner toward one of our staff non-commissioned officers. That video was a lie. It was deliberately edited to create a false narrative. The Marines who posted it knew it was false. They manufactured evidence. They filed false official statements, and they incited a mob to attack the reputation of a fellow service member. The silence on the parade deck was absolute. That officer is here today, Pierce continued. Commander Evelyn Thorne, United States Navy. Some of you know her as the officer in charge of the Signals Intelligence Detachment that supports this base. What you may not know is what she did 3 days ago during Exercise Trident Aegis. He gestured to the holographic display that had been set up on the platform. It showed a simplified version of the exercise timeline, the network collapse, the chaos, and then the sudden restoration. When Red Force launched their electronic attack, they brought our entire command and control network to its knees in less than 15 minutes. GPS failed. Communications failed. Data links failed. Every unit in the exercise was rendered blind and deaf. We were on the verge of complete operational failure. And then Commander Thorne, working alone, identified the attack architecture, neutralized it, and provided targeting data that eliminated the threat. Total time 2 minutes and 43 seconds. Pierce's voice hardened. While some Marines in this battalion were busy posting insults about her on social media, she was doing something none of you could do. She was controlling the electromagnetic spectrum for an entire theater of operations. She was the reason you had communications. She was the reason you had GPS. She was the reason the exercise succeeded. Without her, every one of you would have been declared casualties. Without her, this battalion would have failed its mission. He let that sink in. The Marines who harassed Commander Thorne, who threatened to ruin her career, who lied about her in official statements, are here today. They are going to face the consequences of their actions. And you are going to watch, because this correction is as much for you as it is for them. We are force reconnaissance. We are better than this. We must be better than this. Pierce turned to the sergeant major. Bring them forward. 4 Marines marched to the center of the parade deck and halted directly in front of the reviewing platform. Briggs no longer a staff sergeant. Walters, Donnelly, and Grant all reduced in rank by 1 grade. They stood at rigid attention, their faces pale, their eyes locked forward. Pierce descended from the platform and stood before them, his presence imposing despite his average height. You saw a small woman eating alone, he said, his voice carrying across the silent formation. You decided she was an easy target. You surrounded her. You threatened her. You told her you would ruin her career. Then when she reported your conduct through proper channels, you conspired to destroy her reputation with manufactured evidence. He stepped closer to Briggs. Do you know what happened while you were in that debriefings tent, listening to the network collapse? Commander Thorne was saving your life. Not literally, because this was an exercise, but in real combat, you would have been dead. Your GPS would have been worthless. Your communications would have been gone. You would have had no way to call for fire support or request extraction. You would have been alone in enemy territory with no lifeline to friendly forces. And the only reason that didn't happen is because of the woman you mocked, the tech nerd you dismissed, the officer you thought was insignificant. Well, Pierce stepped back and addressed the entire formation. You are no longer Force Reconnaissance Marines, he said to the 4 men. You are no longer worthy of that title. You have brought dishonor upon yourselves, upon this battalion, and upon the Corps. You will surrender your insignia. You will be reassigned to regular infantry units, and you will spend the rest of your careers remembering this moment and the catastrophic failure of judgment that brought you here. He turned to Briggs. You will render a formal apology to Commander Thorne. Briggs swallowed hard. His voice, when it came, was choked and barely audible. Commander Thorne, he said, his words cracking, I apologize for my actions. I disrespected you. I threatened you. I lied about you. There is no excuse for what I did. I was wrong. I am sorry. His hands were shaking. There were tears on his cheeks. The man who had loomed over her in the dining facility, who had threatened to ruin her life, was now broken before her. Pierce's voice was iron. You will surrender your insignia. Briggs reached up with trembling fingers and unfastened the Velcro on his left shoulder. He peeled off the black and gold patch of the Force Reconnaissance Company, the symbol of his identity. The culmination of years of training and sacrifice, the thing he had valued above all else. He held it out to Thorne on his flat palm, offering it as a gesture of total surrender. The entire battalion held its breath. 900 Marines watched, waiting to see what she would do. Thorne looked at the patch. She looked at Briggs' face, at the tears streaming down his cheeks. She looked past him at the assembled formation, at the sea of faces, watching this moment of institutional justice. Then she gave a single, almost imperceptible nod to Colonel Pierce, and she did not take the patch. She executed a perfect about-face and walked away from the platform, her steps measured and precise. She did not need the patch. It was not a trophy. It was not validation. The institutional correction was the only thing that mattered, and the correction had been achieved. Behind her, Senior Chief Mackenzie did not immediately follow. Instead, he remained on the platform and turned to face the formation. His voice, when he spoke, carried the authority of 4 decades of service. I served in the Navy from 1982 to 2002, he said. I operated signals intelligence during the Cold War. I was stationed in Berlin when the wall came down. I served in the Gulf War. And in all those years, I worked with some of the finest minds in the intelligence community. He paused. Commander Thorne's father was one of them. He was killed in Tehran in 1991 during a Scud missile attack. He was the best cryptologist I ever knew. He could pull signal out of noise that nobody else could hear. His daughter inherited that gift. But she's better than he was. She's better than anyone I've trained in 40 years. What you saw 3 days ago when she saved the exercise, that's not luck. That's not technology. That's pure skill. That's the product of a brilliant mind and years of dedication to a craft that most of you will never understand. He looked directly at the formation. You can choose to respect that, or you can choose to be like these four men and let your pride blind you to excellence. But understand this: in modern warfare, people like Commander Thorne are just as important as people who kick down doors and pull triggers. Maybe more important. Because without her, you don't have GPS, you don't have communications, you don't have intelligence. You're just well-trained people wandering around in the dark, waiting to die. Then, with deliberate ceremony, Senior Chief Mackenzie came to attention and rendered Commander Thorne a salute. It was a profound gesture. A senior enlisted man, a legend in the signals intelligence community, saluting a commander who had proven herself worthy of his respect. And then, like a wave spreading across water, it happened. Corporal Walters broke from his position of attention. He snapped to the sharpest position of attention of his young life, his right hand coming up in a perfect salute, his eyes locked on Thorne's retreating figure. His face carried an expression of dawning, horrified respect. A second Marine saluted, then a third, then a dozen, then 100. Within 10 seconds, the entire battalion was saluting. 900 Marines, unauthorized spontaneous rendering, the highest honor they could give to an officer who had earned their respect not by demanding it, but by demonstrating a level of competence they could not ignore. Even Briggs broken as he was raised his hand in salute. It was the last salute he would give as a reconnaissance Marine. General Bradford, watching from the back of the platform, felt something tighten in his chest. In 30 years of service, he had seen many ceremonies, many displays of military bearing and discipline, but he had never seen anything like this. This was not obligation. This was not protocol. This was genuine respect earned through pure excellence, rising up spontaneously from the ranks. Commander Thorne stopped walking. She turned, faced the formation, and returned the salute with the same precision she brought to everything. Then she completed her about face and walked off the parade deck. The formation was dismissed moments later, and the Marines dispersed, but the moment lingered. They had witnessed something important, something that would be talked about for years in the force reconnaissance community. The day a Navy commander earned the respect of an entire Marine battalion, not through speeches or politics, but through demonstrated mastery of her craft. 1 hour after the formation, Thorne found herself in Senior Chief Mackenzie's office. He was packing, boxes filled with 40 years of accumulated equipment, manuals, and memories. He was retiring in 30 days, and the reality of it was finally settling in. "You didn't have to do that, Senior Chief," Thorne said quietly. "The salute, the speech." "Yes, I did," Mackenzie replied, carefully wrapping an old radio transceiver in bubble wrap. "Your father never got the recognition he deserved. He died in the shadows doing classified work that nobody could talk about. His funeral was small, generic. The official record said he died in a training accident because the truth was classified. He deserved better." He placed the wrapped radio in a box and turned to face her. "You deserve better too. You've spent your entire career in the shadows. Nobody knows what you do. Nobody understands how important you are. Today, for once, you got the recognition you earned. And I wanted to make sure everyone there understood that it came from someone who knew your father and knows you. Someone who can vouch for the excellence in your family." Thorne's jaw tightened, the only external sign of emotion. Mackenzie opened a drawer and pulled out a small wooden box. He handed it to her. "This was your father's," he said. "I've been holding on to it for 33 years, waiting for the right time to give it to you." Thorne opened the box. Inside was an old radio transceiver, an ANURC-35 from the Cold War era. The casing was worn, the switches smooth from decades of use, but it was clean, well-maintained, clearly cared for. "He carried that through his entire career," Mackenzie said. "Used it in Berlin and Bahrain and a dozen places I can't talk about. It saved his life more times than I can count. And I carried one just like it. This technology is 50 years old, but it still works. Know why? Simple design, solid engineering, operator skill. No computer can replace that." Thorne lifted the radio carefully, feeling its weight. "Technology moves on," Mackenzie continued, "but principles don't. Frequency modulation, triangulation, signal processing, pattern recognition. These things don't change. Your father understood that. You understand it better than he did. And now you need to pass it on. Pass it on, Thorne asked. Lieutenant Colonel Voss is about to walk through that door, Mackenzie said. He's going to tell you that the Pentagon has approved a massive expansion of Project Fides in Tenebris, tripling your budget, expanding to 6 skiffs globally, and promoting you to full Commander O5 to handle the increased responsibility. Thorne stared at him. How do you know that? Because I recommended it, Mackenzie said. Your performance during the exercise convinced everyone at the Pentagon that your unit is the future of electronic warfare. They want to replicate it, scale it, deploy it everywhere. And you're going to lead that effort. But it means you can't do this alone anymore, Mackenzie interrupted. It means you need to build a team, train the next generation, pass on what you know to officers who can carry the mission forward. You have to stop being a lone wolf like your father and start being a leader. Thorne looked down at the radio in her hands. I don't know if I can do that, Senior Chief. I don't know if I can let people in. You have to, Mackenzie said gently, because if you don't, you'll burn out just like your father did. You'll work yourself to death, and when you're gone, there won't be anyone trained well enough to replace you. The mission will suffer. People will die. That's not honor. That's selfishness disguised as dedication. The door opened and Lieutenant Colonel Voss entered, a tablet in his hand and a slight smile on his face. Commander, he said, we need to talk about your future. 6 months later, Commander Evelyn Thorne stood in the expanded skiff watching her team at work. The facility was twice the size it had been before, filled with state-of-the-art equipment and staffed by 12 operators instead of 6. 2 new officers were undergoing training. Lieutenant Kimberly Sutton, a Navy cryptologist who had requested transfer after hearing about Thorne's performance during the exercise, and Captain Benjamin Lockwood, an Air Force electronic warfare officer with a doctorate in applied mathematics. Thorne moved between their consoles, observing their work, offering corrections when needed, explaining the principles that underlay the technology. The computer will fail, she told them. The satellite will be jammed. The encryption will be broken. But the principles, frequency modulation, triangulation, those never fail. If you master the principles, you can adapt to any situation. She held up the old ANRC-35 radio that Mackenzie had given her. This is 50 years old. It still works. Do you know why? Simple design, Sutton said. Solid engineering. And operator skill, Lockwood added. Exactly, Thorne said. We honor the old guard by learning from them, then improving on their foundation. Senior Chief Mackenzie taught me that. My father lived it. Now I'm teaching it to you. An alarm chimed on the central display. Thorne moved to the console, her fingers flying across the keyboard. A pattern had appeared in the electromagnetic spectrum. Familiar. Dangerous. She isolated the signal and ran it through her analysis algorithms. The signature matched the stolen NSA algorithm from the exercise. But this time it wasn't coming from an American Red Team. It was coming from the South China Sea. Chinese People's Liberation Army, Strategic Support Force, testing advanced electronic warfare capabilities against American ships in international waters. The exercise had been a test. This was real. She pulled up the threat assessment and began drafting an alert for Pacific Command. But before she sent it, her secure phone rang. General Bradford's voice came through, tense and urgent. Commander Thorne, we have a situation. Chinese task force is moving on Taiwan. Electronic warfare support is critical. I'm activating your unit for deployment. How soon can you be ready? Thorne looked at her team, Sutton and Lockwood watching her with expressions of nervous anticipation. The other operators, experienced and capable, waiting for her command. For the first time in her career, she wasn't alone. 48 hours, sir, she said. We'll be ready. Good. Operation Silent Thunder is a go. Execute. Wilco, Phoenix out. She terminated the call and turned to her team. Everyone listen up. We've been activated for real-world operations. Pacific Theater, electronic warfare support for contested airspace around Taiwan. This is what we've been training for. This is why we exist. The skiff erupted into controlled activity, operators pulling up mission profiles, equipment being staged for deployment, the machinery of war spinning up from training to reality. Thorne stood at the center console, watching it all, feeling the weight of command settle on her shoulders in a way it never had before. She wasn't just responsible for herself anymore. She was responsible for 12 people who were depending on her leadership, her knowledge, her judgment. It was terrifying, but it was also right. She looked at the photograph on her console. Senior Chief Mackenzie at his retirement ceremony, his face creased with a smile, his hand raised in salute. Beside it, the old photograph of her father, young and serious, standing on a ship deck 34 years ago. Two men who had taught her everything. Two men who had shown her what it meant to be excellent at this craft. Two men who had carried the burden of the invisible war so that others could sleep safely. Now it was her turn. Not alone, but with a team. Not in isolation, but with connection. Not as a ghost, but as a leader. She pulled up the mission parameters for Operation Silent Thunder and began her analysis. The electromagnetic spectrum filled her screens, a living map of signals and noise and the infinite complexity of modern warfare. Somewhere in that chaos between the noise and the signal, that was where she belonged. That was where she would fight. That was where she would win. The mission continued. The frequency never stopped. And Commander Evelyn Thorne, call sign Phoenix, was ready.